my name is Schyler Church. I am a California real estate broker as well as a member of the education department at Accredited Real Estate Schools. We offer those course requirements to be eligible to take the state exam, but also a bunch of different options to help you prepare for the state test. One of those tools we use is practice questions, and we have an online program of over 3,600 questions to help you prepare. So I have that linked below if you're interested, but today we're going to talk about a few questions to help you with escrow. So this falls within the fifth area of the California state exam. 1. Escrow instructions should be A, signed, B, delivered, C, notarized, D, acknowledged. Well, escrow instructions, what do we know about them? Well, you're going to have one for the buyer, one for the seller, and they need to be signed by the party. So it needs to be signed. It does not need to be delivered. If we're not talking about a deed here. It does not need to be notarized. The actual deed, or like for instance, your loan documents, those would be notarized. And then it doesn't need to be acknowledged. Acknowledged is something that usually goes in hand with notaries in California, where people acknowledge who you are. Signing the document is who you actually are. So they're like witnessing it for you, for instance, and it's a duly appointed person from the court, usually a notary, so that's why acknowledgments and notaries go hand in hand, but that's not always the case. So the correct answer is signed. It needs to be signed. And let's kind of go over a little bit about escrow, just to make sure you're familiar with the key process or the key terms to it. So escrow, well, what happens is let's say you are buying a home, you are a buyer, and you are wanting to purchase it. But before you give, let's say, $500,000 to purchase that house to a straight across exchange to the seller and trusting that the seller has clear title and will give you title, you use a disinterested third party. And that is what the process of escrow is for, to satisfy the terms of the contract from a third party that doesn't have any interest in the transaction. So you would have an escrow agent, escrow holder, or escrow officer. They all mean the same thing. And they would be the agent of both parties of the transaction, so the seller and the buyer, during the transaction. And the escrow agent will then have the purchase agreement, purchase contract, and will use that and turn it into to escrow instructions. And it's like a narrative form, a paragraph form of what the contract states. And so once the escrow instructions are created, they become the controlling document, and that is where you'll want to know about it. So this is just a little bit. There is more to know about this. This is just a brief overview. Hopefully this is stuff you already know. And what about this thing called an interpleader action? Well, let's say a dispute arises within escrow, and the buyer decides to cancel the contract. The seller doesn't want to give the money back to the buyer, the earnest money deposit that the escrow officer you usually hold. Well, the escrow officer would then have to file an interpleader action to then have the courts decide what to do with that money. So let's go through some more questions. And a lot of this that we just discussed will actually be able to help you answer some of these other questions. 2, altering escrow instructions once they are signed is A, legal if only minor changes are made, B, legal only if the change is less than $200, C, illegal, D, none of the above are correct. Well, escrow instructions cannot be altered. That is illegal. You cannot change the escrow instructions unless both parties agree to it. So the best answer here is illegal, because you cannot change it, but you could do so if both parties agree to a change once the escrow instructions are signed and they are the controlling document. So it wouldn't be legal because minor changes aren't allowed unless both parties agree to it. It's legal. Nope, that's not it. Only if the change is less than $200. Doesn't matter what the monetary amount is. Any type of change needs to be agreed to by both parties. So the best answer is C, illegal. You cannot make changes to the escrow instructions once they are signed. Now, you can make changes if both parties agree to it. So then you'd be thinking maybe that, okay, maybe illegal is not the best answer because there is this exception to both parties can agree to a change. But the best answer is illegal because of how the question is stated. They're just asking, altering escrow instructions once they are signed is illegal. That's what the law says. Now, if they were talking, though, about altering escrow instructions once they are signed, if both parties agree to the change, then that would be allowed. But they aren't saying that. They're just saying changing it. One party wants to change it. And for instance, if it was minor changes or less than $200, for instance. So the best answer is illegal. And that's why understanding the questions and what the best answer is so important and will help you pass the state exam. 3, escrow prorations are based on how many days in the year? A, 365, B, 366, C, 360, D, 350. Well, if you have an accounting background, you might have heard of GAAP, those generally accepted accounting principles, and escrow actually follows this for what we use for a year, of how many days. Well, we do something where we look at it of, we'd say 30 days are in a month. There's 12 months in the year. So we look at it as a 360-day year in regards to escrow prorations. Even though we normally have 365 days in a year, every month varies a little bit, so that takes into consideration. And sometimes we have a leap year. So escrow pulls from from GAAP, and that's what we use. So 360. 4, a short rate is A, the rate on a title insurance policy, B, the premium on an insurance policy, C, the interest rate on a short-term note, D, the interest rate on a short or medium-term note. So short rate, this is something that you kind of just need to know what it's talking about. Short rate does not deal with finance, doesn't deal with an interest rate, doesn't deal with any of that. So you kind of need to have an idea of what it means, and that's why we're talking about it here. Well, short rating is something that we call, it's like prorate. So you know how escrow prorates funds? Well, they also do something called short rate when it comes to insurance. So let's say the seller of a property is paid for their home insurance, fire insurance, and they sell it mid-year. Well, an escrow would then, on that premium that they paid for the insurance, they would short rate it. So they would short rate it. Instead of prorate, it's called short rate. It's a calculation. There's a model to it. There's a lot that goes into it. But what you need to know for state exam purposes is short rate goes hand in hand with insurance premiums. So usually fire insurance is the most common example used. So the premium on an insurance policy that you pay, so you pay that for the year, would be short rated in escrow. So the correct answer is B, the premium on an insurance policy. We're not talking about the rate on a title insurance policy. Remember, this doesn't have anything to do with rates. This doesn't have to do with interest rates on a short-term note or a medium-term note. So this is dealing with insurance. So if you can keep insurance and short rates hand in hand, that'll really help you for state exam purposes. And that we're talking about the premium. So it's like prorate, but it's just called short rate. 5, if a problem arose during escrow, a broker will file A, an interpleader action, B, a formal written protest to the seller, C, a formal written apology to the buyer, D, none of the above are correct. Well, first off, you should automatically be crossing off B and C. A formal written protest to the seller and a formal written apology, they don't do anything. Might help you for rapport you might have with the client, but no, that is nothing that you will have to do. So you should be thinking between an interpleader action and then none of the above. Now, this question's a little tricky because we're talking about a broker. What would a broker file if a problem arose during escrow? Well, usually the broker is just representing a seller or a buyer within the transaction. They are not performing escrow. However, there is an exception or an exemption within the escrow law that basically says you can, as a real estate broker, you can do broker-controlled escrows. Now, this is very rare in the state, doesn't happen a lot, but there's a niche in the market, and some brokers do this. It's DRE does heavily regulate it because this can be very complicated. Well, since a broker can do broker-controlled escrows, what we're talking about here is the broker would then be acting like how an escrow agent would and file an interpleader action when a problem arises. Usually over some type of monetary issue, a disagreement between the parties. So the best answer is actually an interpleader action. You may be thinking none of the above because a broker really doesn't really have much to do with actual escrow, but based on the information provided, a broker can do broker-controlled escrows, and that's really what they're kind of getting at here in the question. So an interpleader action would be the correct answer, and most importantly, the best answer for the question. So as you can see, there's a lot to know. This is just a little bit about escrow. I hope it was helpful on your licensing journey and your studying. If you have any questions or want to check out any of our other exam prep options, make sure to check the link below. Also, subscribe and like our videos so we keep producing new content. My name is Schyler Church. I'm with Accredited Real Estate Schools, and good luck with your licensing journey.